Hi everyone, here's the Bookamists once again, and it's that time of the year again. The time of tops and charts and all the stuff I love. These are the 10 best books I have read this year, except that not really. 2015 was a great year for my readings. I mostly read in my comfort zone, which is basically contemporary American literature, but I also managed to read one or two books I had been willing to read for quite a long time. And in total I read between 65-70 fiction books. And among these there were so many good books that for the first time I decided to film a very short top 20 best books from 2015. I'm going to give you very quickly the 20 to 11 positions, and then I'm gonna talk a bit more about the top 10, the actual top 10. But first, I wanted to spend 2 seconds to say thank you to all you guys for all the support, for all the good book recommendations you left in under my videos in the comment section throughout the whole year. My channel hit 4,100 subscribers recently, which is really golden. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go. Number 20 is The Second Scroll by A.M. Klein, which is a book with some nuances of modernism, not a very widely known book, but a really good one, a very haunting one, about the situation of Jewish people in Europe and in the world at the end of World War II, when the State of Israel was being established. It's, as I said, a haunting book about the situation of such a people in such a difficult time. It features many interesting reflections on, in general, the situation of oppressed people all over the world. It's a very contemporary reading considering the way the world is going nowadays. Number 19 is Dune. I like my edition quite a lot, I don't know if you can see it, which is a book I liked a lot for some parts. I like the epic scope of the novel, I like the space opera feel you have while you read it. I didn't especially mind the way characters were portrayed. To me they all were cold, artless robots. Check my review if you're interested in hearing more. I liked it a lot all the same. Number 18 is Gentlemen of the Road by my main man Michael Chabon, which is a swashbuckling tale of adventurers in the Middle East in the Middle Ages, featuring awesome illustrations too. Number 17 is Swag by Elmore Leonard, which is really a fiction god, an awesome hard-boiled crime novel with amazing main characters, a situation that keeps getting worse and worse until you know something very bad is going to happen. Really addictive. Number 16 is the McSweeney's Mammoth Treasury of Thrilling Tales, which is a collection of genre short stories written by a cast of all-star writers, but I'll talk a bit more about that in a few minutes. Number 15 is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, a fantasy book about magic set at the end of the 18th century, which I liked a lot for some parts, but some parts of the book felt so slow and so anticlimactic. I still don't really know how I feel about this book. It let me down, but at the same time I loved it so much. Again, there's a review in which I talk a bit more about it. Still, it's here, so I guess I liked it. Number 14 is In Persuasion Nation by George Saunders, another short story collection. Lots of short story collections this year. Amazing short story collection, one of the best I've read in recent years. Some stories are more experimental and postmodern. Some stories are straighter and like much more heartfelt and rewarding. In general, this book mixes weird with normal and straight beautifully, and it's really addictive as a read and very rewarding. Number 13 is another collection, The Seeds of Time by John Wyndham, in which Wyndham tried to show people how science fiction can be used to talk about much more than mere adventure. It could be used to talk about romance, about horror, about social issues, about politics. It's a really ambitious collection, and it's a rather thrilling one too. Some stories are much better than others, but the good ones are really golden. Number 12 is the year's weirdest book, which is the familiar number 1, One Rainy Day in May by Mark Danielewski, which is this weird, ambitious project of the first volume in this project of 27 volumes that should imitate some kind of TV series things, in which each chapter is like presented from a different perspective. Very fragmented book, very weird at times, half science fiction, half crime book, half straight up family novel. Very weird indeed, but very effective. I was sold and I liked it a lot. This is not the first one actually, because the first one is in Venice. This is the second volume, which is not going to make the top 10, I think, this year at least. I kinda like some things, but I'm kinda let down by others, mostly because it's exactly the same as the first one. Expect a review in the next few weeks. Number 11 is the Chrysalids, again John Wyndham. An amazing post-apocalyptic novel. The post-apocalypse is Wyndham's specialty. Here, though, like the grimness of this situation, or the horror of it all, it's left aside in order to focus on the rebuilding of the new world and on the difficult situation, the difficult social situations that arise in such a world. It's also a beautiful reflection on the value of culture, at least I read it as such, and it's one of my favorite Wyndham's novels. The Day of the Triffids is probably still my favorite, but this is right behind it. And here we are with the top 10. Number 10 and number 9 are two books which I liked recently, and to me they share quite a few points, and they are Kingdom Come by J.G. Ballard and Numero Zero by Umberto Eco. Both books, I am presenting them together because both books are novels of ideas in which actually characters are there in order to pass to the reader a specific view on the world, a specific philosophical idea, for instance, but at the same time they combine this kind of novel with a very thrilling plot, with elements of actually thriller literature, and they are both kind of addictive reads. They also both address some of the most dreadful, most relevant and terrible issues in their respective countries. Specifically in Kingdom Come, we talk about England and the way consumer society leads to fundamentalism of some sort and to fascism, whereas in Numero Zero by Eco we mostly talk about how Italians cope with historical traumas and how the news are manipulated in the country. Both these books are awesome reads. All of these 20 books, I recommend them to you. I'm going to put Numero Zero higher, which means lower in the chart, because to me it feels much less like a novel of ideas. In Kingdom Come, sometimes characters really feel kinda weird because they don't act or talk like normal people at all. They talk more like megaphones for the author to pass is like philosophical or political views on a certain topic. That said, they are both great books, really. Number 8 is another very weird book for this year, which is another Danielewski. It's House of Leaves. By far the most terrifying book I have ever read. House of Leaves is terrifying because it's a terrifying experience. It's not just the story that is scary, but trust me, the story is very scary. It's the way it's presented. It's this very weird book, very crazy, which is basically a collection of notes on a specific home tape that documents the exploration of a not really haunted house, but some kind of cursed, impossible house. At the same time, it's a beautiful reflection on the value of literature, on the value of sharing stuff with others, of risking something, maybe even your life, in order to be with others instead of just being safe on your own, be all by yourself and forget about the rest of the world. In fact, the author himself calls it more a love story than a horror story, and there is a love story in the book, but make no mistake, Danielewski, don't shit us. This is a fucking horror book, and very scary too. If you've got the guts, if you are into this kind of quirky literature, this is a must read, but I don't think it's for all. Some parts are rather graphic, both as far as sex and violence are concerned. Number 7 is Telegraph Avenue, another book by who is more or less my favorite author, again, Michael Chabon. Telegraph Avenue is not a book everybody loves because Michael Chabon, after so many books in which he mixes imaginative settings and genre elements, has written in Telegraph Avenue a rather straight-up family saga set in California, contemporary California, say, dealing with the death of the vinyl store. At least apparently has done so, because the brilliancy of Telegraph Avenue is that with his style, with his literary style, Chabon mixes all these different elements and genres, and the story at times becomes a ninja movie of some sort, at times it's a horror story, at times it is indeed a straight-up family saga, and the way he plays with this style makes this book priceless, really an awesome reading. To me, it's by far the book in which he wrote better, in which his style emerged as brilliantly as possible. Also, both because of its eccentric style and because of the quirky names that are scattered all over the place, it reminded me a lot, Telegraph Avenue reminded me a lot of Thomas Pynchon, who is coming in the chart at number 6 with Inherent Vice, whose movie I still have to watch. Inherent Vice is an awesome novel, a detective novel, like really psychedelic, drug-filled, about basically the death of the 60s, about the end of this decade of hope, of intellectual and spiritual freedom, about what brought forth the end of the 60s, about the sadness related with that era, and about what of that era still survives nowadays. It's a very nostalgic book, but make no mistake, it can be sad, but mostly it's incredibly hilarious. It's by far the easiest Pynchon book I have ever read, but it doesn't mean it's less good than the others, really. It's among his very best. I recommend it to everybody who's interested in Thomas Pynchon, but who's kinda scared by Gravity's Rainbow and Crying of Lot 49 and those kinds of more brainy books. Number 5 is McSweeney's Enchanted Chamber of Astonishing Stories, I think. Another collection of short stories, genre short stories written by a plethora of both genre writers like Stephen King, Poppy Zebright, Jonathan Lethem, who's also like a literary writer, like other literary writers like Eilert Waldman, the wife of Michael Chabon. All of the stories in the collection are rather great, except actually for Jonathan Lethem's. For some reason, I don't know why, he's one of my favorite authors, but his story sucks. The stories in the Mammoth Treasury I talked about earlier were more mixed. They were in general adventure stories, there was some science fiction. Here, most of the stories, all of them really are horror stories, but what makes me put this book so much higher in the chart is that the stories here, the quality of the stories to me is so much higher. Really, some of the stories in this collection are among the very best ones I've ever read in my life. Like the Stephen King story in this book is so amazing. The Joyce Carol Oates story in this book just left me like really in awe. This is a wonderful collection. If you're interested in reading, in like getting to know some of the authors in this collection, this is a wonderful starting point. If you are unsure about the power and the value of genre fiction, this is the book for you. It will show you that genre fiction can be used to talk about anything, and the distinction between literary and genre fiction is complete bullshit. Number 4, we are all completely beside ourselves. The most addictive book of the year, the one I read the fastest, except for Numero Zero by Eco, which is quite shorter though. I read this book throughout a single weekend, I think, and I just couldn't put it down. It was so addictive. What makes this book so amazing is, well, it's got a really interesting, really nice plot, which is incredibly thrilling, but also opens up space for lots of interesting and not easy at all reflections, but at the same time it's written amazingly. Really, the cliffhangers are put in the precise right spots. The author is brilliant in showing you enough in order to make you more and more curious. This is really a trip. It's an amazing book, full of very strong emotions. It's not unnecessarily easy read. I mean, it's amazing. It's very easy to read, but like the reflections behind it are not easy at all. There is no really easy solution in this book, and it's also rather heartbreaking. Do read it, it's really a gem. Number 3, and really we are entering the very, very golden books, like the ones that I could call any of these 3 books possibly my favorite book of all times, really. Number 3 is Motherless Brooklyn by Jonathan Lethem, a book I almost did not read. I am so glad I did. This is an amazing tale of life in Brooklyn. It's a hard-boiled detective novel, but not an unusual one at all. Its main character is a guy who suffers from Tourette's syndrome, which means that he is unable to stop the flow of words from his mouth, really. But make no mistake, the fact that this guy has Tourette's syndrome is one of his features. It's not his defining features. This is a guy who you might like, you might not like, but whether you like it or not, it's not because of his disease. This is the brilliancy of the book. It shows you how life with such a disease it is, but it doesn't make the disease the defining trait of one's life. That is brilliant. The other brilliant part of the book is, well, the genius plot, of course, but also the way Brooklyn is depicted. The way these characters live in this borough of New York as if it was the universe. And the way the different flavors and colors of Brooklyn are described. It's brilliant. It makes me wish to try all these parlors they go to eat. White Castle, all these burger parlors, bagel parlors. It's amazing. I feel my mouth watering just mentioning it. It's a great book. It rewards all of the senses, especially the heart, which is not a sense. Number 2 is The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar. Wow, really, by Junot Diaz. A book that has been described as a family saga for people who don't read family saga. That's right. It's a book a la Garcia Marquez about this family coming from the Dominican Republic and moving to the United States, except that the comparison with Marquez like doesn't stand at all. It's nothing like Garcia Marquez at all, really. Forget about that. The Brief Wondrous Life, it's the story of a nerdy kid, a nerdy Dominican kid growing up in the US as possibly the unluckiest, nerdiest person of all times. And it's a terribly sad tale of how he grew up, of all the bullying he had to stand, of all the difficult life he had, really, and how he was able to stand up against all that, and, well, how he was able to achieve happiness in a way. Like, if I say it like this, it's gonna sound cheesy, it's gonna sound like, yeah, I will be happy despite my nerdiness, but it's not like that at all. It's actually a heartless book in many ways. It's really, really surprising, and it's really amazing. The thing that makes it priceless and unique is its style, and most notably its narrator, its first-person narrator, who is clearly a nerdy kid, just as nerdy as Oscar Wilde himself, but who at the same time tries to act tough because he doesn't want to be seen as a nerd. And so all the pop references in the book are used brilliantly and in an amazing way to give a sense of the world as seen through the eyes of the narrator and Oscar Wilde, but at the same time are not there just to drop names. Like Star Wars and The Lord of the Rings are not mentioned just to create a connection, they're mentioned to depict a beautiful world. And this is a narratologist's dream. You could analyze the way the narrator like tells the story of Oscar Wilde in so many different ways. You might read him as a friend, you might read him as like some kind of hassle, really. This book is a treasure chest. I can't wait to reread it. I probably will have to do it because I'm writing part of my postgraduate dissertation on it. It's really amazing. It's one of the books I will carry with me on a desert island. Just as much as another book I'm writing my dissertation about, which is number one, my favorite book from 2015, I'm pretty sure about it, Bleeding Edge by Thomas Pynchon. Bleeding Edge is the first time in history, the first time in my life, in which I read a book about contemporary times that really speaks to me about my life, about stuff I know on a daily basis, I have known in my life, in my childhood and adolescence. That is because Bleeding Edge is very much a 90s book, even though it's set in 2001 at the beginning of the of the 21st century. The book is about mainly two things. It's about the rise of the internet, the rise of the web, and about 9/11, and of course about the ways these two phenomena are related and correlated. The book is written in an amazing style. Pynchon keeps getting better, really. It drops all these references to the 90s, not in a phony way. When the book talks about Final Fantasy X, it talks about Metal Gear Solid, it talks about Pokemon, it talks about Nas versus Jay-Z. It does it from a perspective that shows you the characters and the narrator understand these things. It's not just like Pynchon, who's done a Wikipedia research and is dropping names. I think that really, probably his son, Pynchon's son, helped him with this book or whatever. Otherwise, he's just like really simply the coolest person in the universe, because he started writing in the 60s and he gets the contemporary world so well. This is what makes me love the book, but the other thing that makes me love the book is that to me this is of course about 9/11. To me this is about the end of something of an era, the end of post-modernity. One of the many brilliant reflections in the book, possibly my favorite, is a reflection about how, in hindsight, people in America, and I think in the Western world in general, blamed irony for 9/11. They blamed the kind of caustic, heartless irony that made the West weak, that made them like question the rulers, question authority, question the value of military interventions, those kinds of things. The idea was that the West had become so arrogant in a way, so like ironically arrogant, that they had become weak, and so they had offered their side to the terrorist attacks. And this might have an element of truth in it. In fact, many of the major authors from the 90s criticized this element of irony in postmodernism. Most notably, of course, David Foster Wallace was very critical of postmodern irony in a book like Infinite Jest. But at the same time, I think there's something very important in a kind of deconstructive, caustic, anarchist irony of postmodernism, of Pynchon's early novels, for instance. It was a crucial passage in the evolution of Western culture, and it taught Westerners to question everything, every kind of authority, every kind of idea. It's the kind of irony you find behind The Simpsons, and I wouldn't call The Simpsons artless at all, but that's the kind of irony which was opposed with the end of postmodernism. Even in postmodern fiction, in the contemporary fiction from today, many authors follow in the footsteps of Wallace and criticize this kind of heavily deconstructive irony. To me, there's a scene at the end of Bleeding Edge, I'm not spoiling you anything, with two Russians, like hip-hop thugs, who are going to like perform some kind of minor terrorist attack against a big corporation. That scene is beautiful. Just as the book itself is the last attack of postmodernism, of these silly characters who are doing something that probably won't change anything in the book's world, but they are doing it all the same, just for fun, just for the kicks. In the same way, the book doesn't offer you a solution, it's quintessentially postmodern in this. It offers you brilliant reflections on the event, both from the perspective, for instance, of someone who believes the 9/11 was an inside job, and from the perspective of someone who is very much sure 9/11 was like really caused by terrorists, by Middle Eastern terrorists, but it doesn't give you a solution. It's an amazing detective novel, full of emotions, a thrilling tale. If you are looking for solutions for a straight narrative, this might not be the book for you. If you have never read Thomas Pynchon, be sure about what you're like getting yourself into. Maybe you might want to start with something a bit easier, because this is, I mean, not so easy at all. Something easier like Inherent Vice. That said, if you know him, if you like postmodern literature, if you like contemporary American literature, if you like literature in general, I think this book is a must. I think it's my favorite Pynchon novel. I think it might be my favorite novel of all times. I'm not sure. Amazing book. Thank you so much for watching, guys. What did you think of these 20 books, and what were your favorite 20 books, 10 books, 50 books, whatever, from 2015, which you have read in 2015? Thank you again for all your support and comments this year. I will see you in the next one, I guess. Happy 2016, guys. Have some great years, great readings next year. Thank you once more. Bye, guys.